I am delighted to welcome my colleague in Moscow, Paul Richard Gallagher, Secretary of the Holy See for Relations with States and International Organizations. We last met here in November 2021. We were pleased to note that despite the dramatic changes in geopolitics, relations between the Russian Federation and the Vatican remain trustworthy, friendly, and pragmatic. We welcome the upcoming meeting of the Secretary of the Holy See with the head of the Department of External Church Relations of the Moscow Patriarchate, Metropolitan Antony Balakalamsky. He is intended to provide a new dynamic to the inter-church dialogue, which we support. As you know, this morning, Mr. Gallagher took part in the solemn ceremony of laying the wreaths at the grave of an unknown soldier by the Kremlin wall. I would like to express my gratitude to the Holy See for the respect for the memory of our fallen Soviet soldiers and the colossal sacrifices made by our multinational people in the fight against Nazism. This is of particular importance in light of the attempts in Europe to review the results of the Second World War and falsify its history, and most importantly, in light of the fact that neo-Nazism is becoming more and more prevalent in many European countries, including through the implementation of the Kyiv regime, to continue the war against the Russian Federation, against our common history, against the history of our own people. We thanked our colleagues for their significant position on the situation in Ukraine and around it. They outlined the principal Russian approaches to the settlement of the Ukrainian crisis on the basis of the liquidation of its primary causes and confirmed the high assessment of the Vatican's active involvement in the resolution of a number of acute humanitarian issues in the context of the conflict in Ukraine. They confirmed the mutual attitude to the continuation of bilateral cooperation in this area, including on the extremely sensitive so-called child dossier. Unfortunately, literally during our talks, as it happens every day, the Kyiv regime continues to demonstrate outright brutality, striking children. And another bloody crime took place literally on the night of August 23-24 in the Krasnodar territory, Adygea, Dagestan, where, as a result of a massive attack by the Ukrainian armed forces on civilian facilities, children were killed. There was also a drone attack on Nizhny Kamsk, where civilians, including children, were also killed. Undoubtedly, we will never forget and will strive for justice in connection with the bloody terrorist act of Zelensky in Starobelsk. And of course, we talked about Ukraine's attitude to the Russian language, to Russian education, to Russian media, to Russian culture as a whole. Ukraine is the only country where language is prohibited. There is no such thing anywhere else in the world, and we hope that our colleagues from the Vatican will pay attention to these issues in contact with the Ukrainian side, as well as to the actions of the Kyiv regime, which is legally engaged in the destruction of the canonical Ukrainian Orthodox Church. By the way, our ministry recently published a report on the illegal actions of the Kyiv regime against the Ukrainian Orthodox Church, its clergy and parishioners. This is already the third report. It is sent to the relevant international organizations, to the UN, to the Security and Cooperation Organization in Europe, and we are sending a copy to our colleagues from the Vatican. We also talked about the crisis situations in the Middle East, Africa, and other regions of the world, We are united in the fact that they should be regulated by political and diplomatic means, taking into account the primary causes and legal interests of all parties involved. We also speak, like the Vatican, for a respectful attitude to the fundamental principles of international law, the principles of the UN Charter, which must be observed in all their fullness and interrelationship. We have stated the closeness of positions in relation to the protection of traditional values. We believe that complex issues of the application of artificial intelligence could become another direction of dialogue with the Vatican. Today, we talked in detail about the trends in the field of artificial intelligence, including its military application. We have the same positions and agreed to continue to consider this topic subjectively at the level of experts and to coordinate our actions at international events on this issue. We informed Mr. Gallagher about the readiness of the Russian side to resume the practice of conducting political consultations at the level of deputies of foreign ministers, and to resume the Meshmid target consultations on specific issues at the expert level. I believe that this was a very useful conversation. I thank my colleague and give him the floor.
Ваше Превосходительство, министр Лавров, дамы и господа, я бы хотел
Your
выразить мою
Excellency,
благодарность его превосходительству
Minister Lavrov,
иностранной
ladies
политики
and gentlemen,
за
I
то,
would
что
like to
приветствовали
express
меня
my
здесь,
gratitude to
за
the
очень
Foreign
честное
Minister of the
приветствие,
Russian Federation for welcoming me here and for the very honest and open conversation we had today. In an international context where there is a lot of friction, it is necessary to discuss issues together and to discuss them clearly, and this is a sign of responsible action. Dialogue does not exclude disagreements or differences in approaches, but this allows us to avoid misunderstandings. Otherwise, misunderstandings will become the only language of communication. During our meeting, we touched on issues related to bilateral relations between the Holy See and the Russian Federation. We also touched on various aspects of the church life of the Catholic community in Russia. We paid particular attention to ensuring full compliance with the main right to freedom of religion. We also talked about the tragic war in Ukraine, focusing on possible ways to find a long-term, stable peace, as well as to resolve humanitarian issues related to the conflict. We also exchanged views on various regional and international issues. In particular, we discussed the situation in the Middle East, Asia, Latin America, and Africa. In this context, we remind you of the need to find dialogue and diplomacy, as well as the need to support the efforts of the international community aimed at protecting the civilian population and achieving peace. Despite the ongoing significant disagreements in our assessments of various issues, some points of contact were found. We confirmed the need to support open channels of communication and our commitment to protecting the civilian population, and the importance of striving for cooperation on humanitarian issues. These aspects can form a solid foundation on which we can continue to build diplomacy. Diplomacy is especially important when there is disagreement. This gives us the opportunity to openly express our positions in order to determine possible ways of cooperation. In the same way, we can expand our own perspectives in order to adequately assess the common good of all of us. The Holy See continues to pay close attention to the situation in Ukraine. We feel sorry for the suffering of innocent people. The number of victims continues to grow over the years. Many families remain isolated. The psychological and material consequences of the conflict are felt by millions of people in Ukraine and Russia. It is necessary to state clearly that this war must end. For this reason, during our conversation, I confirmed the call of Pope Leo XIII to end hostilities and to start genuine negotiations with the support of the international community. The position of the Holy See remains obvious. The conflict cannot be resolved by military means. It is necessary to create conditions for serious political and diplomatic work. It is necessary to engage in genuine dialogue. Given that the longer the conflict continues, the more difficult it will be to reach an adequate resolution, while the suffering of the population will continue to grow. The Holy See urges both sides to demonstrate openness and goodwill so that dialogue between them can become a reality as soon as possible. At the same time, the Holy See emphasizes its obligation to respect international human rights, including protection of the indigenous population, infrastructure and facilities, as well as the treatment of the wounded and prisoners. The world must be based on full compliance with international law and on the principles of the UN Charter. It is also necessary to take into account the importance of security and the dignity of all people involved. We agree that the security of one person cannot be achieved by the security of others. Pope Leo XIV recently stressed that peace is both a gift and a responsibility. He noted that diplomatic relations and a desire for peace mean promotion of approaches to de-escalation of friction, dialogue, trust building, and arms control. One area in which we have seen a will to cooperate is the humanitarian sphere. We have discussed issues such as the return of children to their families, the situation with prisoners and detainees, exchange of information on missing persons, reunification of families, and support for the wounded. We have raised these issues within the framework of humanitarian criteria, avoiding politicization of this issue. Any specific result in this area can reduce suffering and help restore the minimum level of trust between the parties to the conflict. I would like to express hope that cooperation with the Russian authorities can achieve progress and improve the future. The Holy See will do its best to contribute to the humanitarian missions entrusted to Cardinal Matteo. In the framework of cooperation between churches and church communities, we can help people who suffer the most. Our specific actions, which are carried out by our own institutions, can promote the use of respectful language, contact between groups and individuals, as well as create a climate that can lead to reconciliation. In this context, I would like to draw your attention to the situation of the Catholic Church in the Russian Federation, especially when it comes to cooperation with the authorities, activities of clergy, and various humanitarian initiatives. As for bilateral initiatives, both sides support the need to establish regular contacts in terms of respectful negotiations between diplomatic agencies. However, we still need to achieve peace. Every day, as long as there is a war, it creates new victims, intensifies disagreements and differences between the parties involved, and makes future reconciliation more and more difficult. We need to look at the situation in its entirety as soon as possible to correct and ensure that past events do not lead to the creation of a legacy of hatred. We need to use all the tools in our toolbox to provide a place for dialogue, listen attentively, and support the participants of humanitarian initiatives. We are also ready to provide our kind services in any possible way, hoping that such a desired peace can be achieved as soon as possible. This is my my sincere wish to the people of the Russian Federation, the Ukrainian people, and everyone who continues to suffer because of this tragic war. Thank you very much for your attention.